Well, startling revelations at a commission of inquiry into tax administration and governance at SARS. Former executives detailing how they operated in fear. To help us look into issues of governance at SARS, we are joined by author and consultant Peter Goss. Thank you so much for coming through, Peter. So the sense that I'm getting from these hearings on day 2 now is, one after the other, the people that have so far testified have spoken of a culture where there was serving a higher purpose in the years before 2009, right up to 2017, 2014, that period when Tom Moyane came into the picture. They say that was replaced by an environment of fear and feeling of mistrust when there were all these changes that were taking place. Are you getting any sense as to what was behind that? Was it the leadership style, or was it, uncertainty was when certain changes were being made by the new leadership at SARS?
Every new leader comes in to sweep clean. There's a new broom that would want to sweep clean. I think what's important to compare is the testimony yesterday that related to the history before a new commissioner came on board. And that history that was painted was one seemingly founded on integrity as a basis. And the word integrity came up extensively yesterday. Today's interviews seem to have gone a lot into questioning integrity. I'll speak from the angle of saying what then is the right corporate governance approach that should be adopted in a situation of this nature, of new leadership, of an organization that should be a doyen of corporate governance, really demonstrating that it desires top-end corporate governance for an entity of that magnitude and importance to the national fiscus. So for me, corporate governance starts with ethical leadership. Leadership which is ethical, though also effective, producing. We have two dilemmas that have been pointed out recently, that perhaps production hasn't been as high as it should have been over the short term. And secondly, perhaps integrity has been a big question mark for many people.
Yeah, in fact, one of the witnesses who was head of integrity at SARS at the time pointed to that, to say there were a number of things that she didn't necessarily believe would put SARS in a positive light. How tainted then was the whole thing, in your view, when you have those changes that are taking place that are meant to enhance effectiveness and the integrity of the organization, but hovering somewhere in the background is the issue of politics, because we all know that in as much as this is an institution in our state that performs a function and is supposed to perform it in a professional manner, politics is never far behind.
Here's what troubles me a great deal about this scenario. There's a lot of finger pointing going on. Now, I have this difficulty with good governance and good corporate governance by an organization of this magnitude, with leaders inside, lower levels too, representing this good governance and good leadership. So leadership is not a person necessarily. Let's just get that right. So these parties that come forward and say, we have these dilemmas, historically, I worry about where were they in the times when these dearths in alleged integrity were absent, when there was a dearth in integrity, when there was a dearth in effective leadership. Did they stand up on the highest mountain and scream and say, hey, I'm leaving, I've left, I'm about to leave, there's a problem with ethics, there's a problem with integrity? People have been incumbents of offices for a long time in the organization. So now we have a whistleblowing tendency coming up. Why wasn't the whistle blown at the time?
Well, interesting you should say that. Actually, one of the witnesses, the lady Tsebeletso Seremane, I think her name is, actually raised that point and said we had leadership, but we didn't have leaders at SARS, because she says even at the time at which there were these processes about the retrenchments that were going to be taking place, despite assurances that there would be no retrenchments, she alleges that some of the people, some of the executives that were involved in the process were saying that we can see this is wrong, but this is the direction we've taken.
I'll go back to the central tenet of corporate governance. And it is one called, the Greeks coined the term kybernao, K-Y-B-E-R-N-A-O. Kybernao is collective leadership, collective governance. It is not something you can look up at up with and say, up there was corruption and irregularities or abuses. You've got to look at all of us and say, we were all in the system. If indeed the system was tainted, what did we do to lift ourselves out of that system? How did we, through Kiba now, collectively govern this organization? Well, governance is a collective task between management levels, between accounting officer level, and political level. Back to your question about the politics of the problem. In the politics of the problem, why was this not raised so loud until this particular point in time when the incumbents of positions are no longer in place, or when past incumbents are making noises about recently departed incumbents? So one must be very careful not to look at this situation in a box, in a silo. I think what you lacked in this organization was what we called stakeholder inclusive governance. And at the center of stakeholder intra-organizational corporate governance is employees as the number one stakeholder. And that stakeholder seems not to have screamed loudly enough unless that stakeholder got involved in, for example, an allegation of a rogue unit. Then he started to scream. But the stakeholders didn't make enough noises in the public media, to Parliament, in whistleblowing channels that we at least saw in the public eye as being stakeholder inclusive and demanding your place as an included stakeholder if you're not included.
So we are where we are at the moment, and that's the reality where we are, and that this process is taking place, including this commission of inquiry into governance and tax administration at SARS. How do you restore SARS to what it once was, from what certainly those who've served quite a long time there, were describing? Can that be restored?
Yes. Number one, I believe the Commission should try to come out, if one was to preempt its findings, it should come out with a strong finding and recommendation to the effect of: we need to restore internal trust and confidence in the SARS institution. Whether it is right or wrong as to irregularities or no irregularities, that's impertinent, irrelevant. What's relevant right now is we are so tainted. We're in such crisis, nobody trusts us. If nobody trusts us, we, as the people who are currently in SARS, should take control of SARS and restore trust amongst ourselves. And secondly, then take it out to our broader stakeholder grouping of the general public and the taxpayer. So two key interventions I believe we need to get corporate governance up and running at SARS. One, get employees back on side, keep them informed, and I worry about how much of communication is happening within the organization about what's happening at the Commission. So these revelations are not building SARS, they're breaking SARS. These testimonies are breaking the organization, they're not building the organization. These hearings are breaking public trust, not building public trust. So we need to find some conciliatory median as soon as possible once the Commission starts to make findings that speaks to: we need to first work with SARS on the inside and not lose change management terms as in human capital change management, but corporate governance change management on the one hand, and inclusive of external stakeholders, the taxpayer who has lost confidence.
Yeah. And certainly that has come up quite a number of times. Thank you so much for coming through and having this conversation with me. That is Peter Goss, who is author and consultant, talking to us about the hearings that are taking place into SARS, the South African Revenue Services.